Hey, good morning, Peter. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Great, Jim.
You know, it's a sunny day here in California. We're reaching record highs. We're reaching the hundreds today in San Jose. How are things by you?
Similar. New England's finally getting some sunny weather too, so gorgeous all week.
So, as we talk each other across this big country, I want to welcome you and welcome all our viewers today to Jim Talk Moments. This is a platform that we are using to help leaders give back to our community and share the things that we have worked for, our problems, our challenges, and our successes. So we have today Peter Kirkwood, a corporate strategy leader. Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Excellent. Thank you. So my focus is really in two areas. The first is really assessing the options by identifying, profiling, and prioritizing where it makes sense for companies to focus to get meaningful growth. And then the second part is building the business plans and executing those to turn that theory into a new line of business. I've been working in that field for about 15 years, primarily as a strategy expert within a large company, typically in identity technology. And for the past year, I've been consulting across a range of smaller companies.
So that's great. So as you've been working with companies on strategy and their choices, what are the biggest challenges that you find?
People want to do too much. There's so many exciting technologies, and when you've got something exciting, you're thinking of all the possibilities and all the things you can do, and all the people that want you to grow faster and do more are pushing more ideas at you. And saying yes to too much can really slow down everything you're doing. All those new initiatives fight for oxygen, and none of them are as successful as they could be. So the big challenge is picking which ones to go after and getting enough clarity around why you made those choices that people can really understand it, and they don't feel that all these other ideas are just being shut down, but it's that what really matters is getting the attention it needs.
So something you said reminds me of the word decide, right? We'll shut down things. I don't know if I
Yes.
shared this with you in our previous talks. I usually try to stay away from the word decide. The root word actually means to kill off. That's why you have suicide, homicide, insecticide, and those words.
Sure.
So to decide means we kill off ideas and leave one. So if the top option you pick doesn't work out, people can't feel like they can try some of the things we talked about earlier because you already killed them off. So I try not to use the word decide. I try to use the word experiment or top option, that we want to try.
Very good point. It really is about prioritization. What I like to do to get to those priorities is create a rubric. Say these are the criteria that define what a great opportunity for this unique company are. Maybe you're after something really big, maybe it's a certain segment or leveraging a certain capability. And if you weight the criteria in the rubric, you can come up with a very unique way of profiling opportunities that's different from how your competitors may look at it. Based on that rubric, you pick the first couple you want to tackle. And instead of doing 10 at once, if you do 3 faster, you can do the next 3 and the next 3. You have more velocity through that pipe, and you can make that decision on what the next tier is sooner, either because you learned that one of your current initiatives isn't as attractive as you think and should be deprioritized in favor of moving something else up, or it goes through its life cycle and launches and you're ready to have another project in the incubator. But based on all those criteria, even changing market conditions can be held up against the criteria to say, what does this mean to my prioritization? It makes it a very interactive and adaptive type of framework instead of, lock in a decision and that's your plan for the year.
So I have 2 questions for you.
Great.
The first one is, when you create this rubric, what goes into it and what factors do we need to think about?
A lot of it comes down to 3 things. One is how big's the opportunity. The other is what's it cost. And then the third is risk. And typically I'll have sub-criteria under those, and then it rolls up into some proxy for each of those three factors. Sometimes the opportunity size is about revenue or profitability or single customer size, depending on what you're geared for. Likewise, risk could be about how strong is your differentiator, how much competition is there, or technical risk or legislative risk. And depending on the business you're in, which of those is relevant and how to score them is different. There's also a need to be careful that you don't try to get too granular and break things down to cover every possible consideration, because then your rubric gets too cumbersome. It loses the ability to gut check it or to explain it to people, and you really get an n squared problem. Every column you add times the number of opportunities you're assessing, it can die under its own weight, where it becomes an administrative task instead of strategic insight.
Oh, that's interesting. So it sounds like it's a main part of it, of course, is return on investment. What's my investment and what's my return on that? And then you're adding in the risk piece of it, is what could stop me from getting that return.
Right.
If we talk about risk, and what factors do you talk about risk?
That tends to be specific to the company and the project. I think the one that I like to focus on the most is differentiation, which could be seen separate from risk, but I think your chance to get in there and win and be successful, differentiation is very predictive of that. If you're the fifth company jumping into the same market because everybody knows it's an exciting space, your chance of being successful is much less. Right. And if you've got something unique in your approach or your technology or the DNA of your company, then that makes it really exciting. And that's also where you become different, not just a competitor.
Okay, so tell me more about being different versus a competitor. Why do we care about that?
Sure. I guess there's two things that I've seen a lot of. One is that it drives commoditization. In the identity market, there's a lot of companies with very similar positioning. This is a rapidly growing technology market with huge opportunity, lots of new use cases coming in, huge amounts of venture capital chasing after the solution to these problems. And people are still arguing about commoditization already. And that isn't typical in a growth industry. And the reason is the positioning is very similar. Everyone's saying, oh, we're the most accurate, we reduce fraud. And who really has the truth in those claims can really get lost. Customers get confused by the speeds and feeds and the tech argument. What they really want to hear is, what's a new benefit? What's something that helps my customers be happier? And if you focus more on understanding the customer and how you do things differently than others, then you have a chance to break out of that price struggle. So the commoditization is one part of it. And sorry, if you could bring back what that question was. I know I had a second angle.
So the thing is, how do we look at risk? How do we bring it together? But sure. I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
All right.
Something that you said in there about being technology faster, better than everybody else. I remember early in my career, and this is going to date me. This is pre-internet. I had worked for Reuters, which had little specialized terminals that sat on a trader's desk, and they can get live information from different stock exchange and what's going on in different markets and so on. And the technology was arguing with each other about speed. We get it there half a second faster. It did not take really all that long for the technology part and the speed to be nothing but commodity, and everybody was equal there. So now it became down to, what is the data? What is the information I'm really providing you? Am I just giving you raw data, or am I giving you data that you can really quickly interpret and act on? Is it actionable? So it moved away from technology and speed and more into the actual service we're providing. And that kind of sounds like where you're going.
But definitely, it needs to be and that's a pretty traditional evolution. Things become more table stakes, and then you've got to build another layer of value on top of that. And a lot of times you see the value getting a lot bigger because it forces you to get those insights into why does this thing I do matter to the customer.
Right. So it's all about the customer then. When we're talking return on value and risk, yes, the competitors are there and they're going to interrupt us, but hopefully we're disrupting them. So you're building this rubric. That sounds pretty generic to me. What makes this different, or this your way of doing it different than anybody else?
A lot of times you pick a direction, and I don't think that comes from the leader just being a genius and having this flash of insight about this is the way we ought to go. There's a lot of work that goes on behind that. You need a deep understanding of what the levers are that matter to your customer, what the levers are that makes your company different, and how those come together to make some ideas better than others. And if you can set those criteria well, whether it's a deliberate exercise you put out on a spreadsheet or something that the CEO lives and breathes every day and always has front of his mind, the ideas that fit that and emerge to the top as being the best fit for those things really are the more powerful ones. What I like about getting explicit and putting that on paper is you never want to kill ideation. Ideation by itself is useless, but we've all been to sessions where people put all the ideas on sticky notes and they go on a board, and you've got 50 ideas and everybody pats themselves on the back and then goes home. That's not the end of the work. That's the start of the work. Then you have to apply some rigor to, we can't do all 50 of these things. How do we rank them? And by being very explicit on the criteria, people understand what you picked and why. They don't feel bad that their idea hasn't been killed, like you were saying, but that it's all triaged in a ranking system, and they know why it is where it is. If someone is still excited about their idea, but it ranked pretty low, you've got a very constructive debate about why did it rank low? Which of those criteria did I not see as attractive as you did? And a lot of those rankings are somewhat subjective. We've got a huge amount of uncertainty in these new businesses, greenfield areas. Some things you can size, how many customers there are, what unit price. Others, like competition, maybe you rank it high, medium, low. I like to poll 3 or 4 people in the company, say, what are all your opinions? If they're fairly similar, we've got a decent idea if it's high, medium, or low. If they're divergent, well, we need a discussion to figure out where people are viewing this differently. And a lot of insights come out of those discussions. So that transparency, I think, is really valuable to encouraging employees to keep innovating and innovate in smarter directions. You don't want just more ideas. You want more ideas that are worth moving to the top of the list. And if people kind of know how you're ranking them, they know the type of thing to keep noodling on in their free time.
So I have a lot of ideas coming. I'm ranking them. I'm looking at how much investment it takes. I'm looking at what is the return on it. I'm looking at the risk of it. 50 ideas, I rank them. This sounds like it takes a lot of time. Tell me, how long should something like this take? And I've been in these, and they take for months, right? Months.
It can. What you do is you iterate it. The first cut through you should be able to do in 2 or 3 weeks with a lot of estimates, high-level numbers, fill in a lot of the values by just asking 2 or 3 people. If you have an hour meeting with 3 or 4 different subject matter experts in the company and say, what do you think? Boom, 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 go down the list. You can get their first reaction pretty quick. That ought to be good enough to take your list from 50 down to 12. then do a bit more research on those. Ask a couple more people if they think the way that the sequence is coming feels reasonable. Then you probably also want to layer on a little strategy about which of these fits with our 5-year direction. Do we have a need to offer something new in each of our 3 market segments? Do we have an appetite for 1 big and 2 small projects? Is it 5-year wins or 6-month wins? So layer that in a little bit. You may not prioritize the top 3 necessarily, but a little adjustment for those kinds of appetite questions. And then when you get down to what are the top 3 or 5, then you start going really deep into the business case. And as you build that out in detail before you've invested a lot in one, you may say, oh no, some of these assumptions aren't panning out. Let's bump this one down and dive deeper in the next one.
Right.
So by narrowing the funnel as you go, you can be a lot more efficient with your time. Trying to do the full rigor on 50 ideas, it's 2 weeks work on each. You're done 2 years later. That's just not viable.
Right. Well, I've been in many cases where decision making in an organization is just slow because we have all these options and we're trying to wade through them and do our regular work during the day as well. So we have a couple meetings a week. We go back to our work and an emergency comes up. This goes on the back burner. So the strategy, whether we did it all in the beginning of the year or we're doing it as we go along, it tends to take the back burner half the time.
It can, both in the planning and the execution. The executives, the critical people that know the industry and the company best, also tend to be the most busy people in the company. They're a big bottleneck to all the things you're trying to execute as well. So you absolutely need to be efficient with their time and what you ask. And I think that's why it's critical to have somebody focused on this full time, where it's primary and on top of mind for one person in the company, so that it doesn't get forgotten. If you have to cancel a meeting 1 week because of a crisis, fine, but the background work is still happening, and the plan's still moving forward.
Yeah, so this I often see as a big problem. Another thing that I hear often, executives come to me and they say, my boss, my CEO, my VP, whatever the level they're at, they say, I need to think more strategically. They want more strategic thinking from me. What do you tell those people?
I find it a little ironic that sometimes the nitty gritty of building a spreadsheet is seen as detail work, and the big strategic thought is assumed to be this flash of genius out of left field. And in my experience, that's not really the way it is. Obviously, if you're just filling cells into a table, that's minutiae. But if you can paint a picture that explains what you're looking for and why, and illustrates that there's a thought process and a schema behind it, that's very deliberate strategic work. And it's a chance to kind of document your work and show people it's strategy isn't that one thing that clicks. It's all the work that goes into it, so that at the end the decision doesn't feel like insight, it just feels obvious. As a strategist, a lot of times I feel that I've done my job very well when I present a range of insights and options to the leadership team, and they're like, well, it's obvious that's the one we ought to do. I mean, anybody could have figured this out. And you have to groan a little, but it's like, yeah, I've spent a month putting it together so that it's obvious.
Right.
And that's really the mark of success. Because then those leaders are very confident in the decision. It wasn't just trusting somebody's insight or picking something out of a hat or whatever. It feels right. It feels obvious to them, and they can communicate it up to the board and out to the employees, so everybody's on the same page, and everybody has the same sense that, well, of course this is the right path. We know it's the thing we want to do. We're excited. Let's go do it and kick butt.
So there was one piece in there that I caught that in the beginning while you're building the spreadsheet and you were talking about that, if I can document where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is a key piece that is often missing. My vision, my goal, not something like, oh, I want to build this company from 40 million to 100 million. That's a goal, yes. Right?
Sure.
But that isn't quite the vision, right? What is it that you want to be at the end of whatever? So then when we're doing ideas and strategic thinking and doing that part where we're gathering ideas, you're putting them toward direction. And then as you start executing, it's towards that direction. I often talk to people, when you take those ideas, they're nothing but experiments. Go back to fifth grade, where you did your science fair project, right? And you start off with a hypothesis. And your hypothesis is, if I bring this to market, it's going to bring so much awareness, so much revenue, whatever it is, or I'm going to open a new door to a new market, whatever it is, your goal. This is your hypothesis. And then we start with what is the smallest, simplest thing that I can do that will either prove or disprove this.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that I'm looking for that says yes or no? And then you have a decision at the end of that is to pivot or persevere. I didn't get what I want, pivot, right? Either modify this idea based on data that you received, or it may be time to throw this one out and pick the next one on the list. Or, wow, not only did we get what we want, we got even more so. So now let's add the next experiment to it. So many companies I know, they have an idea and they spend a year building, constructing, and then they don't have the market that they...
I was talking to a startup founder for an app in construction, and he's very excited about his vision and wants to start building a sales pitch and make sure he's got it all right. And it's like, no, we got to reverse this. You've got to talk to people other than yourself in the industry, make sure that more people have the same view, and be wrong, get the feedback a few times. And he's very concerned that he's going to poison the well on his potential sales. It's like, you need to change it around. You need to do a learning experiment first before you do everything to get the sales pitch right, or the sales pitch is going to be wrong because we haven't done the learning yet. Right. So there's definitely a chicken and the egg, and it can make people anxious to be okay with being wrong, throwing something at the wall and having someone shred it and say, this is stupid for these reasons. But you need to hear that, and you need to hear it repeatedly before you really are sure that you've got a product market fit, and that it's broadly applicable.
I've seen that many times, that we go out and we talk to people, and I have this idea. I've done it myself, as a matter of fact. And often it comes back, well, I think you're in the right direction, but you need to, I think this would work better for me, or that would work better for me. Mm-hmm. So that's great. In this case, he may have the right idea, but instead of coming out with something based only on him, he has real customer needs.
Right.
Where he could tweak it to something that's going to be more successful early on. And
the biggest thing I find people come across when they do that right is kind of other motives that people have, whether it's their immediate customer or other stakeholders. Mm-hmm. If someone's worried your idea will kill their job, or if it hurts their ego, or if it hurts their performance metrics for their annual review, even though you can say on paper it's got this great value, it's going to hit resistance that just seems irrational until you understand those other values and incentives for the people you're dealing with.
Right. I would agree. So we have about 5 minutes left. So we're going to have to start bringing this back together. And I have one question for you. How does this make it different? It sounds like these things are obvious that companies should be doing.
Well, I'm glad I made it sound obvious, because that means the value in this approach is apparent. So that's excellent. The difference is really in what you think is important and what you put in that criteria to drive your prioritization. And that's where you want to be very unique to what makes your company strong, your approach, your customer network, and leverage those things, because that's where your priorities will differ from your competitors and show you something that you can be really successful in. And beyond that, I think strategy and driving growth, you really want to look at it as an engine where when you set everything up right and start cranking, it's a lot of work, but the right ideas will consistently come out of that funnel with a high degree of certainty, easy to communicate. It's worth the rigor to get there and have a reproducible pipeline instead of throw a dart at the wall and hope you get lucky because your aim's really good.
Right, right. So if I can add to that, I would say for our listeners to get out of this is to first really have a vision or goal that we're driving towards. Ideate and have a rubric to prioritize. And then just don't build, experiment and talk to your customers. Experiment. And it's I believe I'm an agile guy, right? So iterations and experimenting is the way to work every day. I believe towards success instead of having an idea, building it, and hopefully hitting the mark. I think those days of being able to work that way is gone, and you need to really talk to the market often and get that feedback loop. Any last thoughts, Peter?
I guess picking the right ideas is one part of it. When you look at your go-to-market strategy and how you message it, tie back to those same differences. The things that made this feel like the right fit for you is where your message can be different too, and the way you go about doing it. So make sure that thinking and why it's has the big value and you're the right company to do it. Value and why you're the right choice should carry right through into your sales messaging and positioning.
Great. Well, it was great having you on, Peter. Love to have you again and have more chats in the future. You have great. An open invite. I'd like to say goodbye to everyone. Please come back and say like our channel, subscribe to it, and hope to see you next time on Jim Talk Moments.